Hey everybody, I know you're going to love today's show, Pocket Change, the history of American coins. I promise you're going to enjoy learning all sorts of fascinating facts, and by the end of today's episode, if you're not saying to yourself, I never knew coins could be so cool, I will not have done my job. We're going to begin our journey with the origins in the Colonial Period, then I'm going to guide you through the latter half of the 18th century, on through the changes in the 19th and the 20th century, and then we're going to wrap it all up in today's modern era. You're going to learn how to identify, find values, and some key things, plus a little historical perspective. You might come out of this a coin expert or just a little geekier than you were yesterday. You tell me at the end of this show by leaving your comments below, subscribing to my channel, and clicking thumbs up. Okay, sound good? Hey, and before you leave, maybe go over and check out my last two educational hit shows, I Like Furniture Period and The History of Silver, It's Forking Interesting. Sound good? All right, here we go. To begin our journey through the numismatic history of the United States, I must briefly visit America's colonial period. First off, when I say numismatic, I just mean the study or collection of currency. Coins, tokens, paper money, and related. So, let's get back to our early origins. I'm talking pre-Revolutionary War and the colonial period in the Americas. There was some colonial currency at this time, but it was non-standardized to say the least. Most of your English colonists, in fact, just simply continued to use the common British currency of the period, so the pound, shilling, pence. But as the colonies began to break away their commerce from England, these radical colonists began to print more of their own currency, which was a much better way to support the growth of these new colonies and give the proverbial ye old finger to the crown. It's also noteworthy that very few actual coins were minted during this period, in the 13 colonies. However, foreign coins, like the Spanish dollar, that was widely circulated, and you also had coins from Portugal, France, Germany, Denmark, etc. You get it. But America was truly an international marketplace, and the colonists were very resourceful. Almost anything and everything was actually currency. You have to remember, you had the printed money in the notes, but wampum, one of my favorites, was basically Native American trade beads that were comprised of shells, and of course you had the good old-fashioned barter system, but let's not forget other tradable commodities that were used just like money, such as corn, wheat, tobacco, and fur, whatever the local economy accepted as legal tender. And I'm sure you can see how issues arose when traveling, because what had value in Connecticut may not in Georgia, and so on. And it remained like that even all the way through the Revolutionary War. Even when it had officially ended in 1783, it was not until the Coinage Act of 1792, 9 years later, that the American United States Mint was established, and the rest is history. Oh wait, I'm just getting started. The first American coins the Congressional Act created were in the denominations of the half cent, half dime, don't call me a nickel, the dime, the quarter, the half dollar, dollar, quarter eagle, which was really a $2.50 gold piece, a half eagle. I'm going to show you all these, $5 gold coin, the eagle, which was a $10 gold piece. But the first coin that was actually minted is cool, 1792, the half dime. And there's a legend that the silver in these first printings or mintings came from Martha Washington's silverware. Here's the rest of the coins in the order as they were printed in the 1790s in visuals for you. The half cent, the large cent, the early dollar, the early half dollar, the half dime as we knew it at this period, the $5 gold piece, the $10 gold piece, the bust quarter, the bust dime, and the $2.50 gold piece. This period of coinage from 1792 to 1837 features several design variations as well, so you need to know what those are. The draped bust design was featured on all copper and silver coins minted between 1796 and 1807, but in 1807 the cap bust began to appear on the silver coins besides the dollar. Have a look. Here's an 1807 cap bust half dollar. See the variation? And remember, in these early days, years might go by without a certain denomination ever even being minted at all. The dime and half dimes are great examples of this. Several years would just be skipped because I guess if you don't need it, don't mint it. It was not until 1829 that the cap bust version of the half dime was even released. Check it out right there. And then in the late 1830s, you saw American coinage become more standardized. This is known as the seated Liberty era, and you'll see why. Check out the seated Liberty dollar. Here's the seated Liberty dime, the seated Liberty half dime. I still haven't called it a nickel if you haven't noticed that. The seated Liberty quarter, the seated Liberty half dollar, which came out in 1839. And then you have nothing until the 1840s, which was a really exciting time, and at the very end, because the gold rush was in full swing, so the U.S. Mint introduced the dollar gold eagle Liberty head and the classic double eagle, or the $20 gold piece that we know and love. You've probably heard of that one. This is also when things got a little crazy in the American coin minting world. The rest of the 19th century, starting in 1851, saw the release of some really odd denominations. Let me show you. You have the 3-cent silver. Yes, a 3-cent coin. A lot of people don't know they exist. A $3 gold princess known as the Indian Princess. The short-lived Flying Eagle cent, which was only minted from 1856 to 1858. And I just want to mention, whenever I come across these, I immediately look for the 1856. That's one of those killer dates. There were only 2,000 of them minted that year, so they can be worth north of $10,000 if you find one. So that's quite a lot of pennies, and they are out there. Next was the release of the classic Indian cent, or the Indian head penny as we know it. And they were made from 1859 to 1909, and they've always been a favorite of collectors, as there are several key dates to look for. Like you have 1864, 1869, 1873, and so on. If you have a stack of these, make sure you visit the price guide link I have on my free resource section on my website. It'll take you right to a price guide that you can look them all up. Now, let me give you my 2 cents. Yeah, that's right, the U.S. printed, or minted, I keep saying printed, minted a coin called the 2-cent piece. How about the 3-cent nickel? And yes, I called it a nickel, but it was 3 cents at this time. 1865 it came out. But here's something crazy. A year later, the shield nickel was released, and it was 5 cents, and hence, this is what we think of today as a nickel, the shield nickel. The end of the 1870s saw the release of the U.S. trade dollar. It was produced to compete with other countries' large silver trade coins that were very popular in East Asia as we began to trade with the Orient. Today they're quite collectible. However, I've seen a lot of forgeries, so a lot of times if you find these, you're going to want to submit them for testing. In 1878, the classic Morgan silver dollar was released and remained relatively unchanged until the end of World War I. Morgan dollars were made from 1878 to 1921, and I love Morgan silver dollars as there's a lot to know about them, but there's also a lot of key dates out there and mint marks, and they're like needles in a haystack, and I'm going to say that again later, I'm sure. And you know what? Here's time for me to veer off and talk about mint marks, because mint marks are important, and it's just a letter and a symbol that identifies the location at which the coin was minted. Philadelphia is the oldest mint, founded in 1793, and it's still in business today. Coins with this mark have a P or nothing. So P for Philly, or nothing because everyone knows it's the first mint. New Orleans in Louisiana, 1838 to 1909 will have an O. Dahlonega, Georgia was only operational from 1838 to 1861 and will have a D. Charlotte, same thing, 1837 to 1861 has a C. And San Francisco began in 1854 and they're still around too, and they have an S. Carson City has a CC, they were in business 1870 to 1893, and more on that. Denver opened in 1906, has a D, they took over the D, and West Point has a W, they opened in 1984, and they're still minting. So, did you take note how that Civil War thing had something to do with the Southern mints closing? Actually, they didn't close, but became under the control of the Confederacy, so they were no longer minting, legal tender. But indulge me for a second. I want to talk about the Carson City Mint in Nevada. It opened in 1870 and operated until 1893. There was a 3-year hiatus in 1886 to 1888. And if you know the area, Carson City would seem very odd for a place for a mint. It's not a major metropolis, that's for sure. However, it opened to take advantage of the local precious mineral deposits that were there, namely silver. Read more about the Comstock Lode and the silver rush of 1859. It's not as popular as the gold rush, but just as cool. In its 23-year run, this mint did produce some gold coins, but never the base metal coins or those denominations. Silver was their thing for obvious reasons. So, now that you get mint marks, let me talk about the term key date or dates. I mentioned this a lot, but you need to know what I'm talking about. And what I'm talking about is a key date versus the commons, and this typically means a date of low mintage or production. In other words, there's not a lot of these babies out there. And that's what gives them the numismatic value. It's why knowing your dates and mint marks becomes so important. I personally know a lot of them off the top of my head from learning them, but I often refer back to the blue books. By the way, a blue book is the old term we use. Now it's a laptop or your iPad. There's so many great websites out there so you can have the numbers right at your fingertips. And yes, I'm going to share all these below in my links. Plus, like I said, I have a free resource section on my website. So, before I get back to the new group of coins, one more thing. When you find Morgan silver dollars, remember any Carson city is a find and generally considered a key date. The fact is, they just didn't produce the sheer numbers of the other mints. So, you know, they were a small mint, a small town, but you find that CC, and I'm going to show you where that's located, the CC, and they're the most cherished and sought after of the Morgans. So, let's get back to coins, and here's some really strange bird. I told you the latter half of the 19th century was crazy. A 20-cent piece came out in 1875. It proved to be a failure, though, due to its confusion with the quarter. And, you know, they're very similar. But this is a lesson that the mint later repeats about 100 years later, and we'll talk about that. Although officially minted until 1878, they were only minted for the general circulation for the first 2 years, 1875, 76, because nobody wanted them. Now, for a super rare bird and a super cool story, 1879 is the $4 gold Stella. Less than 500 of these were ever made, and today they're about 75,000 to $250,000 if you find one. Yeah, that'd be a nice find. So why'd they make this $4 coin? Because some Congress members were thinking of the U.S. joining the LMU, which was the Latin Monetary Union, and that would have been like America joining, the Americas making a euro. The coin and prospect of this happening was rejected by Congress, but not before several had been produced and offered to the congressmen at cost. They later became scandalized when several Stellas ended up in the possession of proprietors of Washington's most infamous brothels. Now on to 1883 and the release of the Liberty nickel. Oh yes, I said the nickel. This is the nickel as we really know it. It's the V nickel to collectors. It was released due to production problems with the shield nickel. And there's a couple key dates with these babies, but a lot of them were made due to the commercial demand. You have to remember, this is when coin-operated machines really started to become popular. And don't forget, the fixed price of Coca-Cola beginning in 1886 was 5 cents. Another key date, or key date's not strong enough, is a 1913 V nickel. Only 5 are known to exist, and if you find one, 2 million plus, that's not bad. Now, on to the 1890s and the Barbers. Named after Charles E. Barber. Oh yeah, he's the guy that designed that nickel. He was the chief engraver of the United States Mint from 1879 until his death in 1917. 38 years later now, 38 years there, that was a commitment. So during his time there, he designed most of these coins, a rare feat. He also designed 30 medals during his life. Have a look, here's some of his others. You have the Barber quarter, the Barber dime that came out in 1892, and the Barber half dollar. Okay, so then you didn't have anything new really until 7 years into the turn of the century, and we had some redesigns. First, in gold coins, you had the $10 Indian that was released in 1907, the $20 St. Gaudens in gold, you had the $2.50 gold Indian, the $5 gold Indian, and now a big change is the 1909 Lincoln cent that was introduced. This is known as the wheat penny. Due to the design on the reverse, it has the wheat. All right, and I call these the scratch-off lottery tickets of the coin collector world. And the reason why is there's a lot of valuable needles in the haystack, and there's some that are easy to find. Well, I say easy, it's not super easy. Often you'll see estates and auctions selling a ton of these, and they'll call them unsearched, like an unsearched lot of wheat pennies. And what that's supposed to mean is they didn't look for these goodies. So in 1909, the San Francisco version is about an $80 penny, so a 1909S. But a 1909S VDB with those initials, that can be an $800 plus penny depending on condition. The 1914 Denver, they're about 200 bucks these days, and then a 1922 plain has a few variations that can be $1,000 plus. So you see how it can be fun sitting in front of a stack of these at the kitchen table? Just grab a price guide or have your laptop or iPad there and flip through them. All right, let's keep moving through the 20th century. Designed by James Earl Fraser, a well-known artist and sculptor, and he designed the classic Buffalo nickel. These were minted from 1913 to 1938, and they're another favorite of coin hunters as there are a few popular errors to look for, and we'll talk about errors later. It's the 1936 and 37 three-legged buffalo. Those are the most famous. There's some others, but it's about a $500 nickel if you find one in good shape. That's not bad. Also to note, James Fraser is the guy that did the end of the trail bronze. You've probably seen these before. Okay, so now let me show you coins released just prior to entering the Great War. In 1916, the U.S. Mint released the Mercury dime, the Walking Liberty half dollar, and the Standing Liberty quarter. These were all part of a major redesign that had been in the works for some time. Next was the silver dollar, because it had been the Morgan for some time. This is a great story. In December 1921, the peace dollar was finally released, commemorating the end of wars, the war to end all wars. And it was actually the winning design of Anthony D. Francisi. And kind of cool, they took 8 prominent sculptors of the day and they competed to see who would create the most emblematic design of peace on a coin. Today, I think it would have been a reality show like Peace Off or Last Sculptor Standing. A peace dollar was minted from 1921 to 1935, and when looking through these, I always look for 1921 because they only minted them in December, and the 1928 Philadelphia specifically, and that's about a $200 dollar. Not bad for a buck. Okay, let's keep moving. Deep into the heart of the Great Depression, the Washington quarter first appeared, and it was released in 1932. It's really remained unchanged for the most part, with the exception of some commemoratives. But to note, the 1964 is the last year of silver composition. And what I mean by that is 90% silver, 10% copper. And when hunting through these, I use this rule of thumb. For every dollar of them you find, 1964 and earlier, you have $15. So a dollar for $15. That changes a little bit with the price of silver, but it's never steered me wrong. So let's talk pennies again. The wheat penny is done, and in 1934, the Lincoln Memorial cent appears, and it's basically just a redesign of the back, which has the Lincoln Memorial. During World War II, due to a shortage of copper, the 1943 Lincoln Memorial was struck in zinc-coated steel, and this continued until 1946. In fact, 1944 to 46, they're made from spent cartridge cases from the war. Okay, here's another holy grail, the 1943 bronze penny. They were supposed to all be steel at this time, but legend tells us a small number of 1943 cents were struck on a few leftover bronze coin blanks. A few years ago, in fact, one sold for $1.7 million. So guess what happened? Now there's a lot of forgeries out there, but there are a few in existence. Okay, let me jump back a little bit. The 1938, I skipped over the Jefferson nickel. This one hasn't changed much in design either, but also during World War II, it switched to a composition of 56% copper to 35% silver and 9% magnesium, whereas pre-war and post-war, they're 75% copper, 25%, again, to save copper for the war effort. The silver in these war nickels makes them worth $1 or $2, so just look out for them. Anything between 1942 and 45, there's also a lot of errors in there too. All right, World War II is done, and Nellie Taylor Ross, the director of the Mint, wants to see a Benjamin Franklin coin, and she gets what she wants. 1948, the Franklin half dollar. Here's another great historical footnote. Nellie Taylor Ross was not only the first female director of the Mint, where she was the director for 20 years, but prior to that, she was the first female governor of Wyoming, completely ahead of her time. Read about her. Not to skip over another post-war design, I forgot about the 1946 Roosevelt dime. That was released just a year after the president's death. And like the quarter, it's 90% silver, 10% copper, all the way up until 1964, and including 1964. Since 1965, it's been 91% copper, 8 or 9% nickel. I am big on these historical footnotes, so I want to talk about this. Those last two coins, John R. Sinnock was he was the sculptor engraver, and he had his initials on them. And this was during the Second Red Scare, and some believed his initials, JRS, secretly stood for Joseph Stalin's initials, and of course they did not. See, they had real fake news back then too, and it was a lot easier to pull off, like the 1938 radio broadcast of War of the Worlds. Look that up. That's some good fake news. Anyway, nothing new to show you until 1964, a month after the assassination of JFK, Congress authorized the Kennedy half dollar. Released in 1964, that year it was 90% silver, 10% copper. After that, from 65 to 70, it was 40% silver, 60% copper. And then by 1971, they were the same as the dime with the 91% copper and 8 or 9% nickel. Another president's death brings us another new coin. It's the Eisenhower dollar, released in 1971. Most of these are that copper-nickel alloy like the Roosevelt dime and Kennedy's, but a few were released as commemoratives, and they were 40% silver, 60%. People call them the clads. They have a little more value, might be 15 bucks or so, you know, and they were a compromise because everybody wanted them to be, Congress wanted them to be 40%, 60%, but they said for general circulation, we'll do this. And it's good they did because they were never really popular. Other than being sold as keepsakes, the Nevada casinos were the only other people that liked them because they could use them for their slot machines. So what replaced it? A woman in 1979 finally graced our currency. It was the Susan B. Anthony dollar, but it was a disaster. Just like the 20-cent piece from 100 years earlier, it was confused with the quarter due to its size and color. The vending machine lobby hated it. Didn't work in the slot machines or the vending machines. Here's a crazy fact, 1.5 billion of these were minted over the span of them, and the government was stuck with a pile of about $1 billion, and maybe that's where our stimulus checks are coming from. Awesome. Anyway, they learned their lesson, sort of. The next two are known as the golden dollars, and they're a bit smaller, they're quarter-sized as well, but that gold color easily distinguishes them. The Sacagawea came out first in 2000, and then the presidential dollars in 2007, they came out. They're kind of a commemorative, but they're also a dollar, etc., etc. In 2010, the Lincoln penny gets a facelift and a new shield back. Have a look. And that's pretty much all the US coins I am going to talk about, but I still have more for you. I didn't talk about commemoratives like the state quarters or the silver or gold commemoratives, mints or sets, that kind of thing, but they're all in the online price guides. So if you find a set, you can look it up just as easy. My favorite site for this is numismedia.com and their collector fair market value guide. It's free and always updated. Make sure you click the collector fair market value. They don't try to make you log in or sign anything. Also, the usacoinbook.com is just as good. I just know my way around the other site better. They're a little older. So now I want to briefly explain the grading system to you. It's very important in coin valuation when it comes to resale, especially with those key dates. The key is knowing when is it worth paying the fees to a coin grading service to certify and place their independent and unbiased grade upon your coin. And what I mean by that is, have a look. If a higher grade is going to prove your coin to be worth more than the cost of the grading service, it could be worth it. Remember, a collector will generally not go by your opinion of grade, or even theirs. It's like that with coins, comic books, baseball cards, stamps, now even action figures. Everyone's got an opinion and no one's good condition opinions are the same. Enter this standardization system. The independent third party takes the personal opinion out of it. Again, it's got to be worth it to do it. You know, when they slab these things, they can change the price or what they charge you on the value of the coin because of their exposure if they were wrong or sued or whatever. When you see a big grade value jump on a coin, ask an expert if you're not sure. Most coin shops will give you their opinion for free. They'll say, yeah, send it in for grading or don't. I always did. PCGS has a grading chart with amazing visuals. I'm going to give you some visuals here, but it's nothing like a lot of sites out there, what they have. NGC also is a big grading company as well. I'm going to have links for those. Here are the standard grades. You have poor, kind of obvious. You have fair, which still is worn. You have good, which is also still worn, but you can make out what the coin is pretty easily. You have VG8, or very good, again worn, but most of the design elements can be made out. You have fine, which, you know, most of the elements stand out clearly. You have very fine, and I always say to look for the readable letters. If you can really make out the motto and liberty and all that, it's probably very fine. Then you have extremely fine. Again, this is where it starts getting like very important because the price can really change. Now you have AU50. That's about uncirculated, okay? They can have dings and scrapes, but again, the coin's a really good looking coin. Here's where you really need to have an expert here. I had a customer once bring us a rare $20 gold piece, and I thought it was AU58, which would have been $250,000, but when it came back graded AU50, and therefore worth $30,000, that was a big difference. Now, the client was thrilled to death because it was better than a $3,000 coin, but it was disappointing. So yeah, AU58 is like everything but mint. Now you have mint state. MS60 ranges from MS60 to MS70, and that's mint. And again, mints have bad days, just like with baseball cards where you can open it up and brand new and it's never seen the light of day, but that day they had a bad day minting, you know, so MS70 is the holy grail. It is the perfect coin. Even under 8-loop microscope or whatever, it's flawless. And even the mint, right off the mint, that's a rare find. It really is. So again, there's all these different levels. And with the really early coins, obviously if they've been circulated, this doesn't come into play. But with the new collectors, this is where you really want to know these charts. So I hope that helps. Now I want to talk a little bit about errors. So I want to finish the show off with this. It's a brief explanation because errors are like their own animal. But it's something, because there's a whole world of collectors out there, I could probably do a show just on errors. It's a coin that was actually produced incorrectly by the mint itself. And there are specific people that specialize just in error coins, and they come in all shapes and sizes, probably what makes them super fun. Have a look at all the variations, and I'm sorry, this isn't even all of them, but this is the most popular. My personal favorites are the double and triple strike errors and the off centers. Check out this penny and quarter. See what I mean? Errors and the values of errors can be quite broad. Also, there's a lot of fakes or just plain old damaged coins out there. You know, the quarters that we used to put on the train tracks when we were kids and stuff. That's not an error. So the degree of error also plays a factor. Like if it's a misstrike, how bad is it? You know, I've actually found these in rolls of quarters before, like a misstrike. It's kind of a cool thing when you find one because, you know, a quarter could be 50 bucks, you know, and it's brand new. Like the three-legged buffaloes I talked about, that is a known error. It happened all the time. The books will have known errors, and what I mean, it's the ones referenced in the price guides because it was an issue that happened over and over again at a certain year, or a certain mint had a quality control issue. Again, I just want to say this all seems like a lot to know, but if you have any interest at all, and you just watched this so far, so you must, there's so much available to you online. If you watch this video a few times, I think you'll know more than 95% of the antique collectors out there, you know, and I want this to be like my last two videos, just a deep dive, but a quick overview introduction to the genre. I call them the history of stuff, but it's like really to immerse you a little bit. I want you to be armed with enough knowledge to be dangerous and have a broad view, because it's how you'll learn and maybe get excited about collecting. Perhaps you want to be a coin collector, or you just want to look at a collection you inherited competently, and I hope this helps. Maybe you want to be a personal property appraiser or an auctioneer, or you're dabbling and just making a few extra bucks. You're buying and selling storage units. Then this and my other videos are probably for you. Make sure you check out joshlevinespeaks.com. Look at my past blogs. There's a lot of information in there. I'm going to make this into a blog. Free resource section that has links to all these things so you can look them up easier. The best sites to do that. Hey, just subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click like, leave a comment, good, bad, or ugly, because it all helps me and helps me with my next video inspiration. Until next time, thank you so much.